Welcome to Open Dental Software, highlights for version 22.2. In this webinar, we will cover some of the highly requested features for this version. Let's start here in the appointment module. You can now add a default tooth number to be charted when using an appointment procedure quick add here in the center section of the appointment. To do this, you'll start by going to Setup and down to Definitions. Single-click on the Appointment Procs Quick Add line item and add in a new Procedure Quick Add, or double-click to edit an existing line. In this case, I want my 1PA to chart out a specific tooth number 7. So we'll put in the ADA code, followed by the pound symbol and the number that we want default charted. Let's click OK and show you how this will work. We'll go into the appointment and single-click on our single-click item here. It's going to still add the procedure as normal, but now we'll include the tooth number that I've set as a default tooth to be charted on. Before setting the appointment complete, it's always a good idea to verify the tooth number that should be associated to the appointment. Our next new preference is under Setup, Preferences, and Appointment Appearance. You can now choose a week view start day of either Sunday or Monday to better align with your practice's work week. Once you've chosen the start day, clicking on the day and week buttons underneath the calendar, clicking on the week option will now show the start date that you've chosen in the Preferences section. You can now quickly jump to a specific date on the appointment calendar by clicking on the date at the top of the calendar and typing in the date that you want the calendar to jump to. The calendar will jump to the specific date you've typed in, either forward or backward. Our next preferences are inside the Family module. You can now note your patient's preferred pronouns in the Edit Patient Information window. If you double-click into this window, you should now see the drop-down for preferred pronouns. If you're not seeing this drop-down available, click OK, go to Setup, Preferences, and into the Family General. Make sure to enable the box for Show Preferred Pronouns for Patient. Regardless of whether you turn this preference on or not, you'll now have a third option under the Gender section for Other to choose from. The Chart module has our next preference. There's now an Ortho tab if you have the Show Ortho button and tab in Chart module enabled in the Ortho chart setup. If you don't have this tab showing inside of your Open Dental, go to Setup, Ortho, and check the box at the top. For a detailed walkthrough of this new tab, please see the link below this video for orthodontic charting. Our next preference in the Chart module is the ability to now block signatures when there are incomplete auto note prompts on a procedure code. Let's go back to Setup, Preferences, and into our Chart Procedure section. The bottom preference is Block Procedure Note Signatures when there are uncompleted auto note prompts. This requires that your note is completely filled out or that at least the prompts that don't pertain to that patient are removed before being able to sign the note. Let's go over how this works. We'll set the appointment complete for today. I'll double-click into the procedure and click on our Auto Note button, choosing the Auto Note from the left and inserting it to the right. Open Dental has now started the prompts. You can choose from the prompts, or if you're not ready to finish that section of the note, you can click Exit to come back to the prompts at a later time. Clicking OK will now give you the option right next to your Auto Note button to go back and edit the Auto Note, beginning with the last prompt that hasn't been filled out yet. If I try to sign for the note at this point, it will allow me to click on the digital sign or sign with the mouse or Topaz signature pad. However, if I click OK with this preference turned on, I now get a pop-up that the remaining Auto Note prompts must be completed to sign this note. Use the Edit Auto Note to resume. This gives me the ability to go back into the Edit Auto Note and choose to fill out the notes. You can still skip notes for now and then remove them from the prompt before clicking the OK button. If I prefer not to fill it in inside the prompt, I can still do that by filling it inside the note. As long as that prompt is no longer within the note, when I click OK, it will go ahead and allow me to sign for the note. Our next miscellaneous feature has to do with incomplete procedure notes. Specifically, the Incomplete Procedure Notes report. We'll go to Reports, Standard, and into the Daily section, where you can find your Incomplete Procedure Notes report. This report can now be filtered by providers by selected clinic. Keep in mind, if the user is restricted to specific clinics, only accessible clinics will list. When selecting all, including the hidden, results also include hidden clinics the user has access to. The results do not include clinics users are restricted from or procedures not assigned to the clinic being searched. Another miscellaneous feature is the option to automatically disable pop-ups at a specific time. This can be found under Setup and down to Miscellaneous. Over on the right-hand side, you can now disable pop-ups after a certain time span to a default number of days or a default time span in hours, minutes, and seconds. Our next features can be found in the Imaging module. We've added new mount definitions. To find these, you'll go to Setup and down to Imaging and into the Mount section. To add a new mount, simply click on the Add button or double-click into an existing mount to make any edits. The new features inside of this window can be found over on the right-hand side. You can disable text background colors, automatically flip images on acquire, or set a default to adjust mode after acquiring images in a series. The next preference has to do with the measurement scale. Inside of each mount, you have a specific measurement scale that can be set up. You can also now set a default measurement scale for new images taken, and to find these, you'd go to Setup, Preferences, Imaging General, and down in the bottom section, you have the default measurement scale. Please see the link below this video for X-ray and measurement mounts to determine how to calibrate your measurements for this section. Within the same preference window, there is now a separate option to default imaging categories specifically for the video capture button, seen here inside the Imaging module. Our next area with new features is our sheets and forms. You can now pre-fill patient forms using data already entered in your database and previously filled out forms. Simply start by going into the patient and then clicking on the Forms button at the top of the Open Dental program. Select the form that you'd like to pre-fill. You'll see that our patient filled this out several months ago, so we can use the Pre-fill button to make a copy, but pull new information from the database where possible. Click on the Pre-fill. We'll load the new form with information that Open Dental already had in the system. We'd then be able to print it out for our patient or email it off to our patient. This now puts the date and time stamp with today's date, showing the new registration form for today's appointment. If your form was filled out prior to 22.2.1, such as the form that I have here, this will pre-fill the form with data from the database. Any miscellaneous input field on your sheet will still be left blank. After you've updated to version 22.2.1, your patient will need to have one newly filled out or updated form for future pre-fill information to be copied from the previously filled out form. If you are using web links to have your patients fill out web forms created prior to 22.2.1 must be updated in order for data to pre-fill properly. Insurance information will only pre-fill from the database. If there are medications, allergies, and/or problems already entered in the database for that patient, these values will be used to pre-fill the form. If no medications, allergies, and/or problems are entered into the database, then data from the previous form will be copied over. If there are sheet fields that have been renamed in your system, the field cannot pre-fill from forms before that field was renamed. The very last section we've added updates to is under Setup and down to Security. Let's go to the user groups and our regular users. As a good tech tip, you can always use the Collapse All button down here at the bottom and be able to click on the Expand to expand the tree using the path given for each permission you want to look at. We'll start with new permissions for the printer setup. This can be found under Main Menu, under File, and then Printer Setup if you want to allow or disallow your staff to be able to do that if they're in the specific group you have highlighted. Our next permission is under Setup, Advanced Setup, and that Show Features option that we have if we need to access the show features for things like public health or turning on things like clinics. It's whether or not you want to allow your staff access to that area or not. We've also added new provider permissions under Lists and down to Providers for Provider Add and Provider Edit. The next permission is under Clinics and being able to edit a clinic. The next permission is under the Tools and being able to allow access to the Setup Wizard. And the next permission is under your main toolbar, the ability for an employee to be able to delete off a task. For the provider permissions for Add and Edit, an audit trail entry and additional details are now recorded for Provider Add and Provider Edit inside of the Audit Trail section. Audit trail entries when a superfamily is added or removed are now logged. If you have any additional questions about the features we've gone over today, please feel free to reach out to Open Dental.
Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. If you have additional questions, please call our support line at 503-363-5432 or access our complete online manual at opendental.com. And to make sure you're staying up to date on our latest training videos, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications.